We live in an era where the songs on the radio are constructed on laptops. They are perfectly quantized, entirely devoid of human error. The pitch is corrected, the tempo is locked to a grid, and the life is slowly squeezed out of the performance. But in the golden age of classic rock, music was built differently. It was built by musicians pushing wood and electricity to their absolute breaking points. What if I told you that one of the most vital guitar solos of the 1970s wasn't even supposed to be recorded? It was captured entirely by accident, while a guitarist was just warming up backstage. Today, we are counting down 10 guitar solos that completely defy time. These are not just classic tracks. They are raw, unrepeatable moments of human genius. They prove that modern, manufactured music simply cannot compete with the soul of a real guitar. Some songs become hits, others become something else entirely. Number 10, Reelin' in the Years by Steely Dan. Here is what most people don't realize about Steely Dan. Donald Fagen and Walter Becker were notoriously demanding in the studio. They were meticulous. They would routinely force seasoned session musicians to play the same 8 bars of music, 50 times until it was flawless. They wanted perfection, and they usually got it. But their most famous guitar solo broke every rule they had. In the summer of 1972, a session guitarist named Elliot Randall just happened to be in the neighborhood. He dropped by the recording studio simply to say hello to his friends. Fagen and Becker were working on a track that needed a spark. They casually handed Randall a guitar and told the engineer to roll the analog tape. Randall plugged in, and he played the complex, blistering solo for Reelin' in the Years in one continuous take. He nailed it on his very first try. There was no overdubbing, no second guessing. Just a guy who walked off the street and laid down fire. The playing is so fluid and inventive that it caught the attention of the heaviest hitters in rock. Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin reportedly named this specific recording his absolute favorite guitar solo of all time. Think about that for a second. The architect of hard rock bowing down to a jazz rock band proved that grueling studio perfectionism sometimes loses to raw, unscripted spontaneity. You cannot program that kind of magic into a computer. You just have to be lucky enough to catch lightning when it strikes. Number 9, 25 or 6-4 by Chicago. There is a strange contradiction in 1970s rock radio. The most aggressive, teeth-rattling guitar solo of 1970 came from a band famously known for its soft jazz horn section. When you mention the band Chicago, people usually think of gentle love songs and smooth brass arrangements. But early in their career, they harbored a secret weapon named Terry Kath. Kath was highly underrated by the general public, but his peers knew exactly who he was. Jimi Hendrix reportedly walked up to Chicago's saxophone player and told him that Kath was actually better than he was. For the track 25 or 6-4, Kath took a descending chromatic chord progression and completely tore it apart. He bypassed traditional scales entirely, searching for something darker. Instead of using a standard guitar amp, he plugged his modified Fender Stratocaster directly into a Boggin public address amplifier to achieve a thick, heavy distortion. He added a wah-wah pedal to create a distinct, menacing growl. The result is a solo that sounds like a wounded animal trying to escape the speakers. It is frantic. It is dangerous. This single track permanently erased the line between jazz rock fusion and pure, unadulterated heavy metal. Sometimes the song you write by accident is the one that defines you. But in this case, Kath knew exactly what he was doing. He played with a ferocity that a software plugin could never emulate. Number 8, More Than a Feeling by Boston. Sweeping, stadium-filling solo was actually recorded in a tiny basement by an engineer working a day job at Polaroid. Tom Scholz spent years perfecting his tone in his home studio, while the music industry entirely ignored him. He sent out demo tapes and received nothing but rejection letters. He was not a rock star living in a mansion. He was an MIT graduate who understood the intricate mathematics of sound. Charles built his own effects pedals from scratch. He was determined to achieve a massive sound that no professional studio in Los Angeles could replicate. When it came time to record More Than a Feeling, Schultz did not hire a famous producer. He relied on his own ingenuity. He achieved the signature harmonized solo by painstakingly overdubbing multiple guitar tracks. To get that soaring, crystalline tone, he ran his guitar through a massive homemade 12-band equalizer. He would record a part, rewind the tape, and layer another harmony right on top of it. The solo builds like a classical symphony. It climbs and weaves, offering a melodic triumph that defined the 1970s FM radio experience. And that is where everything changes. This song launched the era of arena rock. But more importantly, it proved that a do-it-yourself basement recording could sound larger than a multi-million-dollar studio. The meticulous layering of analog tape gave the music a warmth that digital recording still chases today. That same analog warmth also happened to be the perfect vehicle for a much dirtier sound down in Texas. Number 7. LaGrange by ZZ Top. The most recognizable Texas blues solo wasn't played on a pristine, factory-fresh guitar. It was played on an unpolished instrument missing half of its paint. Billy Gibbons was searching for a sound that matched the dirt roads of the South, and he found it using a highly specific, aggressive finger-picking technique. Instead of just striking the strings with a plastic pick, he violently pinched them with his thumb. This created artificial harmonics. It made the guitar squeal and howl in a way that sounded entirely uncontrolled. The track lulls you in with a quiet, steady groove, and then it shifts dramatically from standard timing into a furious, relentless shuffle. That massive rhythm is driven entirely by Gibbons and his pinch harmonic technique, pushing the amplifier to the edge of blowing out. It introduced gritty, unpolished Texas blues to a global mainstream rock audience who had never heard anything quite so raw. Sometimes the imperfections in the wood and the sweat on the strings are exactly what make a recording endure. Number 6, Sultans of Swing by Dire Straits. By the late 1970s, the musical landscape was bitterly divided. Disco owned the dance clubs, and punk rock was actively trying to destroy everything else. But the guitar solo that defied both of those massive movements was recorded by a former English teacher who simply couldn't afford a pick. Mark Knopfler had developed an intricate, rapid-fire fingerstyle technique out of sheer necessity. He often played late at night and didn't want to wake his roommates. When he finally made it to a recording studio in London, the producers actually asked him to simplify his complex phrasing. They thought it was too busy, too complicated for FM radio. He refused. He played the final track entirely with his bare fingers on a 1961 Fender Stratocaster. He plugged it directly into a Roland JC 120 amplifier, purposely choosing an unusually clean tone instead of the heavy distortion that everyone else was relying on. It proved that technical brilliance and clear bell-like tones could still dominate the charts during the height of the punk rebellion. It is a quiet kind of rebellion, choosing grace when the whole world is screaming. Number 5, Go Your Own Way by Fleetwood Mac. There are times when a guitar isn't just an instrument. It becomes a weapon. The aggressive, stinging lead track on this song was recorded while the guitarist was actively staring down his ex-girlfriend across the studio floor. Lindsey Buckingham poured all of his bitter resentment towards Stevie Nicks directly into his hands. During the solo takes at the Record Plant studio in Sausalito, the interpersonal tension was so thick that the sound engineers felt deeply uncomfortable just being in the room. You can hear that anger bleeding through the microphone. Buckingham layered his acoustic rhythm, playing with a heavily distorted Les Paul. He used a rare picking style that treated the heavy electric guitar like a frantic, thrashing acoustic. The resulting solo is not smooth, it doesn't soar, it stabs. It transformed real-life romantic devastation into one of the most powerful, emotionally charged performances in rock history. Pain has a sound, and it rarely asks for permission before tearing through the speakers. Number 4. Eruption by Van Halen. But here's the strange part about the solo that forever altered the course of the electric guitar. It was never supposed to be on the album. It was merely a backstage warm-up exercise. Eddie Van Halen was just sitting in the studio, casually practicing his two-handed tapping technique before a scheduled gig. Producer Ted Templeman happened to walk by and overheard the sheer chaos coming from the amplifier. He immediately ordered the engineer to hit record. Templeman insisted the instrumental be included on the band's debut record. Eddie actually protested. He pointed out a slight mistake right near the end of the recording and begged to do it again, but Templeman flatly refused. Eddie was playing a custom-built Frankenstrat, patched together from spare parts, running through a Variac transformer to intentionally lower the voltage to his amplifier. This created what he famously called the Brown sound. He single-handedly reset the standard for guitar playing in a matter of seconds. He divided the timeline of rock into 2 distinct eras, before Eddie and after Eddie. It is a stark reminder that true genius often happens when you think nobody is listening. While Eddie Van Halen accidentally captured lightning in a bottle, other historic solos were born out of pure physical exhaustion. Number 3. Free Bird by Lynyrd Skynyrd. The most recognized extended solo in Southern rock history was originally written just to give the singer a break. Ronnie Van Zant asked guitarists Alan Collins and Gary Rossington to write a long instrumental ending for their live sets. Why? So he could rest his vocal cords and grab a cold drink during their grueling sweat-soaked club gigs. The band was working relentlessly, and Van Zant simply needed a few minutes to breathe, breaking the improvisational norms of the era. Collins meticulously planned this fast-paced attack in advance. He knew exactly where his fingers were going to land before he ever struck a string. He recorded the furious solo on a Gibson Explorer, and then he deliberately overdubbed his own playing in the studio. This created a massive dual guitar wall of sound that lasts over 4 relentless minutes. It is an absolute marathon for the fingers. It became the defining concert anthem for the American South. It set an unmatched benchmark for endurance and emotional climax in live rock performances. Sometimes, a practical solution to a mundane problem gives birth to a movement that outlives its creators. Number 2, Hotel California by Eagles. There are songs where the groove carries you, and then there are songs where the finale requires absolute mathematical precision. The intricate, dueling guitar finale of this track was not improvised in the studio. It was strictly copied from a cheap cassette tape demo. Don Felder wrote the chord progression and the solo melody on a simple 4-track recorder in a rented Malibu beach house. He mapped it out perfectly in his head. Months later, when he and Joe Walsh tried to record the final version in Miami, they started improvising. They were just jamming, trying to find a new spark. Don Henley walked in and forced them to stop immediately. He told them to call Felder's housekeeper back in Los Angeles, find the original cassette, and play it over the phone so they could relearn it note for note. Finale switches back and forth between Felder's Fender Stratocaster and Walsh's Fender Telecaster. It acts as a deliberate conversation between 2 distinct voices before finally harmonizing in a complex descending arpeggio. It stands as the definitive triumph of 1970s studio perfection, blending hard rock edge with intricate classical composition. It proves that ironclad discipline and rigid structure can sometimes elevate a rock song into a symphony. Number 1, Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd. But what happens when that structure becomes a prison? The most powerful guitar solo of the decade was played by a man furiously fighting with his own bandmate over the very direction of the music. David Gilmour and Roger Waters were barely speaking during the recording of The Wall. The atmosphere in the studio was toxic. Waters was pushing a restrictive, lyric-heavy direction, leaving very little room for musical expression. So Gilmour used his guitar to speak for him. he recorded 5 to 6 different takes of the final solo. He then meticulously pieced together the best parts into one seamless, soaring emotional climax. It was a silent, blistering rebellion against the suffocating control of his bandmate, played on Gilmour's famous black Strat, through a big muff fuzz pedal and a Yamaha rotating speaker cabinet. The tone possesses a three-dimensional weeping quality. The guitar isn't just playing notes. It sounds like it is physically crying out in frustration, begging for release, and finally breaking through the wall. It represents the absolute pinnacle of emotional storytelling through an instrument, transcending standard rock to become an immortal piece of sonic architecture. Today's quantized, computer-generated music simply cannot replicate the raw, human soul bleeding through these strings. The deepest struggles in the studio often become our greatest triumphs on the record. These 10 solos are more than just impressive fretwork. They are the emotional timestamps of a generation that valued authenticity over artificial perfection. They remind us of a time when musicians didn't just play the notes, but made the instrument bleed. As we look at the sterile landscape of today's top 40, these classics endure. Because some songs become hits, but others define an entire moment in the human experience.